This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Yeah, so this first tutorial will be based on the characteristics of land. Now, I briefly mentioned about this box, which we are reading as a part of question 1. And here, this is a quotation in chapter 1 of Pironkis, which is a good chapter, which talks about lots of characteristics of land. And he's quoting Davis and Heathcote's work from 2007, where they analyzed the US market. And they found that between 1975 and 2006, land accounted for almost 36% of the value of housing stock. And over the same period, if we compare how much was the increase in price of land as opposed to structures, they found that land prices quadrupled, whereas structure price increased to only 1.3 times, but land prices increased to 4 times. Now, what I want you to do is to think of a graphical representation of this statement, where you can use demand and supply curve for land and improvement to explain how will the situation be different for land from structures. And the hint here for you is that land is inelastic, which means that its supply doesn't change with price, whereas improvements on land or structure on land is elastic relative to land. So would you want to attempt first before I start discussing the answers? It will be good to attempt. And if you have something to show and share your screen, let me know. Take 2 minutes, think about it. I'm stopping to share my screen so that anyone who is interested can share their screen. How many of you remember demand supply curves from your previous lectures?
Yeah, so the supply of land would be just a vertical line because it is inelastic, and the supply of the construction material would be going up. Like so as quantity increase, the supply of the construction material would increase, like in a parabolic way, a positive parabolic way, and demand for both would be going down, just in a parabolic fashion.
Yeah, so the demand curve will be downward sloping convex shape, while the supply curve for structures will be upward sloping, like for any other good. For structures, and for land it will be a vertical line. Okay, this sounds good. This sounds right. Now, what do you think will be the impact of change in demand or increase in demand on the price of land when compared to the price of structures on land? Do you want me to share some?
Sorry, you were just being cut off, I think. So I didn't hear.
So let me try again. It's not connecting to my phone for some reason, but I'll try again. I'll keep trying. Anyway, I was saying that how do you think the price will change if the demand increases for land?
If the demand increase for land, then that means there's more construction activity going on.
Only use the demand supply graph to explain if you keep it. We'll keep it simple.
Yeah.
Help your friend. Come on.
I think price would go up if demand increases.
Yes, absolutely. Would someone like to share their screen and show me graphically?
I've got a really bad graph, but it's probably I've just drawn the I've just drawn like the little. Let me just do this. It's can people sort of see this? Sorry, I'm just sort of like trying to like figure this out in my head. This is based on purely like the land price. So if we have constant supply, I'm trying to like organize how we get to the 4 times. You said land has increased by 400%.
Yeah, quadrupled. Yeah.
So I guess this is like effectively this is like an increase in demand. It shifts up. If supply is the same, I'm not too sure.
Okay. Anyone wants to help Darcy here?
Correct my terrible paint.
No, it's better than mine. Don't worry. Froilan, do you have anything to share? We are talking about how to represent the demand supply curves of land.
What was it? Sorry, I joined it quite late. Was the question just if the demand increases, what happens to the price?
Yes.
Question?
Yes.
I don't have a drawing on me, but I downloaded the tutorial sheet, and there's a similar graph that I think would represent that. So I don't. If I share my screen with that, it might help.
Yeah, sure.
So this is the graph that I was looking at. So if we just think of this supply line as a constant supply, if the demand increases, it'll go from D to D1. So when you look at the price here, it'll actually jump a tiny bit from P to P3. That's my idea of how price is affected by demand. So that supply is constant and that demand just increases by shifting to the right.
Right. Perfect. Now since you are on this graph,
Yeah.
Let me ask you and everyone else that which supply line would you choose to represent land supply, and which supply line would you choose to represent structures on land? There are 3 supply lines we see here in this graph.
Mm-hmm.
So which do you think represents the supply of land better? And which do you think will represent the supply of improvements on land better? Inputs are welcome from anyone.
I think SM would be the one for land, and I'd say S1 would be the one for construction, just because price doesn't increase as substantially.
Okay.
Based on that's a bad line of thought.
No, it's a good line
about
of
the 1.3x versus the 4x, and
so you are trying to choose very different angle lines. Yeah.
So if D1 is increase over time, and that's like 4x, and that's P1, then P2 probably isn't going to be, which is quite close. Anyways.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. Darcy, do you notice one difference in this graph and from your graph? It's the slope of demand curves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you remember that demand curves are downward sloping?
Yeah.
And supply curves are upward sloping.
Yeah, so I just do the demand curves in like my one. So like mine is effectively like the SM line, and then the 2 demand curves on the left-hand side of that SM line is sort of what I do.
Yeah, good.
All right.
So
I agree with Darcy with the land being SM as well. And I think the reason why I agree with him is because I think the land, I don't think you can really increase the supply that easily. So here, when it says quantity, does it make sense to say that the quantity is always the same, which is why it's a straight line? You can't kind of increase it that way. It has to stay still, because you can't really, I suppose, like land is, it's like finite. I mean, yeah, we can't make more or less of it. So the supply is constant. Is that what this SM represents?
You are very right. Although not in this picture, this particular graph is for a different context, which we'll come to later. However, yes, you are absolutely right in saying that the supply line, if we have to choose a supply curve for land, SM will represent the supply as inelastic, which is a perfectly vertical line. And for very same reason, exact same reason that you explained, which is that the supply of land is fixed in the context of, say, a country and as a whole, while we can still change the supply of land between different uses. Like, for example, we can convert from agricultural to residential, and we can change the distribution of the total land mass between different uses, but we can't change the total mass itself.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other thoughts, any other conflicting thoughts, or anyone wants to challenge Fräulein and Darcy's explanation? Or
and I think the
Oh, you're back. Welcome back.
Sorry, my internet is dropping. I don't think I'm going to pay my internet bill this month. But I'm trying to connect with my phone, which works really well. But somehow my computer is not reading, so I'm messed up a bit. Sorry.
No worries.
You were saying you can?
Yes, I was saying that the supply and demand for the construction material would not have the constant gradient.
We are not talking about construction material. We are talking about improvements on land. So if
So
the building itself.
So the like S1 and D, S1 and D would not be the straight line. And what I was saying that. will probably be like a various gradient.
Various gradient. Let me try to share my screen and the graph that I have for you. We'll use this one. So to first remind you that a demand curve is a convex downward sloping curve. And by increase in demand, we mean a rightward shift of the graph. And when this happens, the graph, the vertical line represents the supply curve for land, and an increase in demand for land would mean that the quantity is fixed, but the price increases from A, or the equilibrium is formed or shifts from point A to L, which means that the price increases from, say, 1 unit to 4 units, which you all were rightly proposing anyway. Now, the green line may represent the supply curve for improvements. And this means that with increase in demand, both the quantity demanded and price changes, but the change in price is less for structures because the supply curve for improvements is flatter than the supply curve for land. And therefore, the change in price with the same increase in demand for, say, land and structure, the change in price for structures will be less as compared to change in price for land. Does it make sense? So what the question was asking is to represent this fact which is expressed in this box, that in the US, over a time period of, say, 30 years, the price of land quadrupled, while the price of structures increased to, say, 1.3 times only. So we understand that land supply is much more restricted than the supply of built area on land. It's easy to construct more floor space, but it's not easy to supply more land.
I have a quick question about this one. So it says on average, land accounted for 36% of the value of aggregate housing stock. So does that mean that for your average house, 36% of the value of it is in the land? So that land, okay. And you,
yeah. It will obviously be different for, say, houses as compared to units. But this is average, I believe, for all housing stock, including houses and units.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the second question. This is my favorite question because it confuses you a lot. So we say that one of the characteristics of land is that it gives the owner the power of monopoly, which means that there is only one piece of land at a particular location and there can't be any other piece of land on the same location. So there is locational monopoly for sure. But does it also give the power of monopoly in the market to negotiate that he or she is the owner of that piece of land and there is no one else who is the owner or who has the same product? And we do consider land as a heterogeneous product, which means that each land parcel has its own set of characteristics and they are different from each other. Now, do you agree or disagree that land gives the power of monopoly to its owner? If the owner wants to come in the market as a seller, then they have the monopoly power.
I don't think so, because there's like substitutes, and this is where like housing sort of like sub-markets come into play. You know, one house in one suburb, let's say, I don't know, like Frankston or so, it's probably going to be pretty similar in terms of like location and like livability to another house like next door. So if you're an owner of like a property there, you can't really have much pricing power in sort of like activating those monopoly characteristics if there's like similar substitute properties around.
I agree to an extent, and I've got like an example. So like, you know where Sandhurst is? It's near Cranston, and Sandhurst is a little suburb, and basically it's got a golf club, right? And in the golf club, there's real estate built inside the premises of the golf club. And the house there is, I had a look, it's probably like 200 grand more expensive than the house just one street outside the golf club area. So that's like, I think it was just because of the location, these people want to play golf and be close to the golf club, so they will pay 200 grand more to buy a house which inside the golf club, and inside in terms of other locations will be like pretty similar to outside. So
I'll challenge your thought there, Yukian. I would ask that, let's say that I'm living inside that premises where the golf course is, and someone is living across the street outside that premises.
Yeah.
But if the golf course is access to the golf course is for everyone, then will it give a price premium to those who are living on this side or that side of the road?
The golf club is open to everyone.
It is open to everyone.
It is open to everyone. It's a private club. It's a private club, but the club have nothing to do with the real estate. So they're separate. So like you can still play in the golf club if you don't live there. It's a separate thing. But people would still want to live inside the premises because of, I think, because inside there is this less traffic, and this is a semi-closed area. Like there's open road into there, but it's like small road, and there's less cars in there, and the environment's a bit nicer. You've got lakes and gym, and there's like dining and like communal stuff.
So there are more amenities associated with, and there may also be some status symbol associated with living in that.
And in there, the properties which are next to the golf field is more expensive than the ones that are not next to the golf field.
Okay.
So there's lots of, so that's why it's a monopoly, because there's so many different criteria, and there's people just wanting that same criteria, which is really hard to find, so that people would be willing to pay for a bit more for the right criteria, because it's just so many criteria associated with housing. So
I actually do agree with this to some extent, and I think you particularly see this in like beachfront property, where people just for being like on the front of the water will pay like ridiculous amounts of money, and even property like one door back. So for like an example is this place down in Edithvale sold in 2010 for like $1.9 million. This was like 11 years ago. And the house next door to it sold last year for $1.2 million, like 10 years later. So they paid this enormous premium just for being on the beachfront. And so definitely, I think if there's like some really lucrative attribute about the property, you
that is
definitely
linked to its location.
You can definitely have monopoly power. Interesting.
Okay. Anyone has any other thoughts? So we are saying that market location, there could be an aspect of locational monopoly, but not always. There could be very comparable properties sitting next to each other and not exercising any monopoly, because there are many buyers and many sellers in the property market for same set of characteristics?
I think there's more monopoly happening like in the more premium markets. Like for housings would be like multi-million or even more than 10 million. So there will be more monopoly happening there, like because people who can afford like multi-million houses, multi-million dollar houses would want exactly what they want because they have the money to choose whatever they want, so they will be more picky. So that's why, like, I think if you were talking about like just cheaper housing, like probably like those 700,000, $500,000, it would be not that much of a monopoly.
I think that's another very interesting aspect that you brought in, Yukian, which is that if the product itself is rare, that means there are fewer sellers. And also if the product is very premium and expensive, then there are fewer buyers. So then we are not talking about a perfectly competitive market. We are talking about a partially monopolistic market.
Yeah.
There is another very classic example of monopoly. Fräulein has something to say.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I agree. I think you do have like a monopoly, like the power, because if we kind of think about like that supply and demand curve again, the question's saying you've got a unique location. So the supply for like a unique location as well is kind of lower as well. So that would, I would think it would raise the price as well. But yeah, I think, short answer, yes, I think there is a monopoly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how about this? When we say monopoly, then we are agreeing that the buyer or the seller can influence the price. So let's say that we are talking about my property, 18 Kipling Street, North Melbourne, and there is property next door, 20 Kipling Street, North Melbourne. Do I have the monopoly? Yikiana is laughing. No, I don't have the monopoly, but why I don't have the monopoly? Because I am not sitting on a very rare product, is it? My location is still only one property at this location. So is the next door property.
I was gonna say, I still think you still have the owner still would have the monopoly, because I think the quality of land differs from place to place. So, for example, if your land is a piece of agricultural land, it may not have possess the same quality as the one next to you. So, the
productivity.
If there is another agricultural land like sitting right next to you, it may not have may not be as efficient in growing.
Yeah.
Oh, Darcy, you replied me.
Yeah. Sorry, I was lost again.
Welcome back.
Yeah. So, in general, yes. But let's say I'm trying to sell my house and I say that, well, all other comparable properties are selling for 1 million, but I want to sell my house at 2 million because I have the monopoly. Will I get buyers?
No.
Why? I have monopoly.
You have monopoly within the like a certain price range, but not like unlimited price range. Like you'll probably have monopoly if your house is better renovated or better built in the area, but it wouldn't be too much. You probably have like a set range of
But
price.
if my house is better renovated, then if I'm charging more price, I'm essentially charging for the amenities it is offering, not for the monopoly.
Oh,
Isn't it?
true. Yeah.
And I will get that. If it is a genuine match between the amenities my property is offering and as compared to other properties, then yeah, corresponding to the price, I should get that price. Yeah. When monopoly becomes crucial is when it's attached to the fixity of location, like in case of a coastal property. The location is fixed and the amenity is fixed to that location. Then probably someone can charge monopoly. Now, a good example of monopoly would be, yes, market is monopolistic, but not always, depending on whether there are substitutable options available in the market for that kind of a location or for that particular land parcel. Like Zihua was saying about agricultural productivity. If there are many agricultural fields of comparable productivity, then probably one would not exercise monopoly. But in general, we do understand that each land parcel may be slightly different, and therefore each property sells at a different price. Yeah. Now, a classic example of monopoly is when, let's say, the government is planning a road or a rail network, and it wants continuous parcels of land to be used for a train track. If one person on that route holds out, then that is where that particular location is definitely needed for the project, and there is no other substitute, because that track has to go from that land. So then, as a owner of a particular location, I can exercise monopoly because there is no substitute for my land. What do you think, you can?
I think that's a hard one. So I think basically the extent of monopoly is to the extent that how much the government would need to spend by set up a bridge to go over the property or go around it. So if, for example, if it costs them like 10 billion to it's like $10 million to set up a bridge or have the other alternative, then the monopoly would be worth like $10 million.
No, I don't want to lose my air rights above my property. I mean, I wouldn't want to fly over, going over my house, right?
Then like going around it probably be costing a bit more than like so.
Going around it would mean a lot of nuisance for the traffic on a highway driving at 100 km speed. Yeah. Or a train riding at a much faster speed. What do you think governments do to overcome this monopoly power of a landowner?
Depends on which country you're in.
Let's talk about Australia. Anyone wants to help, you can.
Is there certain legislation that allow government to like negotiate with the landowner?
There is
such a
negotiation. Yeah, that's called the market.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You negotiate, you buy what you want. But the other person doesn't want to sell. So then where is negotiation?
I think the person would want to sell it if you pay a high enough price for them to sell.
Okay. How many of us will agree that if we get high enough price, we will sell?
Because he wouldn't get, if you pay a lot more than what the market is worth, then he would have no reason to refuse your offer, because if he refuses, he just lose on like lots of money, and which he could be better off leaving, get the money and buy a much better house at a more like a better area. So
okay.
I feel like some pieces of land you can't really put a price on it. Some people really might not be, they'd be really reluctant to sell. And I think what you were getting to was there's that hint on question 2. So there's a government power of compulsory acquisition of land. So I think that has something to do with the answer.
Yeah, true.
Saying.
That's where I was trying to get at, that we do have monopoly of location as in countries where private ownership of land is allowed. And to overcome that monopolistic power of a landowner, governments in most part of the world, you exercise their power of compulsory acquisition. Why I said this is my favorite question is because my doctoral research is on how do we fairly compensate people who are compulsorily acquired. Is payment of market value of land fair enough payment? As Yukian was saying that we can offer more, etc. But that's another story. The story here is that at times the monopoly power does come into play very strongly, especially when we talk about public projects, which need contiguous parcels of land. So, yeah. So you all are right that market is can be monopolistic and market can be at times offering substitutes. So locational monopoly does come into play in the property market many a times when the property, some of the aspects or amenities which that property or piece of land is offering is fixed with that location, then it does offer a monopoly power to the owner. Okay, wonderful. So let's proceed to the next question. I'll share my screen again. Yeah, so in this figure, Howie and Josie is trying to explain the impact of increase in demand on property prices in 3 different time periods. SM is the time period in that particular moment. Like we do say that structures on land can be supplied and we can change the supply, but we also understand that it takes time to build any structure. So if the demand increases and prices increase, property market does respond to it, but it takes time to respond to it and supply more into the market. So SM is basically a fixed supply period in that particular moment. And SS is the supply in the short term, and SL is the supply in the long term. And by this, in this graph, we are referring to the supply of built space. We are not referring to the supply of land. We are talking about structures and improvements on land. Now, one observation that Howie and Josie makes is that when we say that the supply of improvements is fixed in a particular in moment and it changes over time, we don't take allowance of the size of existing stock. For example, in areas like Greater London, most housing that comes into the market is from the existing stock. It's not new stock that is coming into the market. So what Howie and Josie is indirectly implying is reduction in vacancy rates when they refer to the use of existing stock, first, the existing stock being used. Now, what do you think? Here we are talking about durability of real estate. Why do you think that there is a lot of stock sitting in the shelf? This doesn't happen with bread at Woolworths, that it's sitting on the shelf, and once the demand increases, first you roll out what's sitting there for 10 years, and then you supply more. That's not how you behave, right? But here we are talking about some asset that has a life of 50 to 100 years and is already existing, and it's very durable. So what do you think, if we want to take account of durability of real estate and we want to take account of vacancy rate in the market, what impact do you think will it have on the supply curve in the momentary short and long period? Where do you think the impact should be most? And I have no answer for you. What do you think, Kerry? You have been relatively quiet today.
Low elasticity of the supply.
So let me ask it differently. Low elasticity of supply or more elasticity of supply? What will happen in the... So we are assuming that in the moment when demand increases,
Yeah.
in that particular moment, let's say today, the demand increases, we are saying that the supply is fixed. But is that true? If you want to take account of the durable stock that's already sitting in the market and is vacant, is this supply fixed?
No, it's not fixed.
Can it change quickly?
Yes, because there's lots of property that's sitting around.
So let's say you are a rational landowner, you have a vacant property, and you see that the demand for a residential property is going up and the prices or rents are going up. What would you do?
Put it on sale.
Put it on sale or put it on rent?
Yeah.
So we do expect some stock to come into the market immediately, don't we?
Yeah.
And that is the vacant stock.
It's faster respond.
Faster
to
response.
the demand.
Yeah. So what will it do to the supply curve, which is Sn?
So it's more elastic.
And how will you represent that?
Shallower gradient of the curve.
Yeah, you would want Sm to be flatter, slightly flatter than what it is. It will not be perfectly vertical.
Lower gradient.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anyone else wants to share their views? How will durability impact on the response that property market gives to increase in demand?
So would you think gradient shift momentarily? Like, no, sorry, the supply curve shifts left and right momentarily.
I would think that it will change slope rather than shifting right or left.
Yeah.
Because shifting right or left would mean that the quantity demanded is changing or quantity supplied is changing at the same price. Yeah,
Okay.
like let's say if I shift it rightward, whereas we do understand that the price does increase. So a rightward shift or a leftward shift probably will not be the right thing. I think the slope will change. Any other thoughts?
So what does it mean by durability?
Durability means that it has a very long life. It doesn't expire or become obsolete very soon. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Like when we compare it to, say, automobile, aircraft, or some such other products which also have long durability, as compared to, say, bread or cookies. So all are manufactured. But some products have longer durability and some products have very short life. So does durability have an impact on how...
I'm sorry, everything you just said, we missed that because you cut out. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So I was saying that some products have a shorter life, like bread and butter and things of that sort, which are very, very short shelf life. But some other products like ships, aircrafts, houses, They have a very durable life. So we have stock which is in use and occupied, which is stock which has not been bought or consumed yet. And then we have stock which is in supply, in the pipeline. So this is not the case. This is not the same case as with products which are not durable, say for example bread. There we have a stock which is in use, and the stock which has already been produced but is not in the shelf is very little. Most of the stock is in the pipeline and will be ready the next day. Yeah? So this is this peculiar characteristic of real estate, like a few other comparable products like ships and aircrafts. Yeah? So how does this impact the durability? That there is a sitting in stock which is not consumed yet, but is ready to be consumed and will be sitting there. And then there is some in the pipeline which will take longer time to come in the market. So this stock which is in the market is essentially coming in the market for two reasons. One, that it's vacant, and other, because there is a constant change between owners and renters. I may be selling my property tomorrow and renting another property that I was occupying. Or I may be changing from owner to renter and renter to owner. Or I may be downsizing and I may be renting out a room or a portion of my house tomorrow, depending on how the demand is changing. So there is the existing stock that comes in the market and not just new stock as a response to change in demand and price. Yeah.
Yeah.
So otherwise, when we discuss durability as a characteristic, we just comment on it as something that, yes, has a long life. Real estate has a long life. That's it. But how will it impact on the market? What impact does this characteristic of durability has on the market? That's what we are trying to discuss. So when we say that in the moment when, say, demand changes and prices increase from P to P1, is the supply really fixed in the moment? Or is there opportunity for real estate markets to respond to it very quickly using their vacant stock? Does it happen? So does the market respond by using its vacant stock or existing stock? At the moment, prices are quite high. Are we able to respond to the change in price and demand? Is the supply able to respond to it?
Sorry, were you asking a question?
Yeah, I was asking that at the moment the prices are quite high, demand is quite high, say for landed houses.
Yeah.
And is the market able to meet the requirement?
I think so.
So where do you think the market of the supply of stock at the moment? Which graph do you think you would relate to? For landed properties.
SS.
How about you, Fräulein?
Sorry, could you please repeat the question? Sorry, I didn't understand it.
So I was saying that at the moment in the Australian market, residential market, we are observing that there is good demand for houses.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if you have to represent it, we know that D will represent the original demand and D1 will represent the new demand. Mm-hmm. But which supply line or supply curve would you choose to represent the current status of the market for houses?
I would like to think SSL, the long-term so the prices are lower.
For houses or for units?
For houses.
For houses, you think we can produce more landed properties?
So I think I'm a bit lost here. Is the supply representing just real estate, like places?
Yeah, let's keep it simple to units. That's simpler to understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So the demand for units has increased.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's assume that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then you were asking, where do you think we're
going up. There's more house going to going on sale, but yeah.
Sorry, I again lost the connection. Yeah.
I was saying that there's more house going up for sale at the moment. So I'm saying that there's more supply on the market.
So essentially, the point that we are trying to make here is that there is one stage before the physical supply of new stock happens, and that stage is when the market actually starts consuming the existing stock, which is already in the market, but not consumed yet. Yeah. And new stock comes into the market not only because of new supply, but also because of, say, reduction in old stock existing and converting its use. For example, if an office building is existing already but converted into residential use, then we are changing the use of an existing structure into another, but that may still qualify as new supply. But let's say if I decide to rent one floor of my house, then it's an existing residential stock coming into the rental market.
Going back.
Yeah, or going back from the market. Yeah, then as compared to new physical space being created. And this characteristic is peculiar to real estate because in real estate, the life of stock is long. So it keeps changing its position and keep influencing the supply in the market on top of new supply of stock. So this is a very peculiar characteristic of real estate. Don't you think so?
Yeah. And some other products as well, like
some
bicycle.
Other products as well.
Yeah.
Even though some other products are, any product which has a long life and a demand in the market can show a similar phenomena. But in real estate, it's even more peculiar because when it comes to ships and aircrafts,
it's depreciation.
It's depreciating. It's not fixed to the location.
Yeah.
And it can't be subdivided. Like,
so you're saying it can be subdivided or it can't be subdivided?
Well, a ship and an aircraft can't be subdivided. When it comes to property, its rights can be bundled differently.
Oh, okay. So you're subdividing land and creating new, like 1/2, 1/3.
Yeah, or different floors of my property can be rented or can be retrieved back into ownership. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So any questions, any thoughts, and then we will conclude. Rather than using the term subdivided, I would say we can rebundle repackage the same product.
Yeah. So one of our family friend rebundled her property there was like a tennis court at the back of her property, and she subdivided that and demolished the tennis court and got the government permit to subdivide and just sold that land and the house separately, and she made a bit profit.
Yeah.
Which she wouldn't have made if she sold the house together.
Yeah. So that repackaging with the same land area is possible, or same built area is possible. Yeah. So those are the things that are slightly unpredictable, and increase or introduce a twist in the property market because of the durability of the product. So to sum up, there are many characteristics to real estate and land which make it different from other financial assets. Like, for example, inelasticity of supply or imperfect inelasticity of supply. Let's say not perfect inelasticity, but imperfect inelasticity of land. The monopoly power attached to the location fixity of the product or land and housing at times, or anything that has location peculiarity and uniqueness. And also the durability of the real estate has an impact on the supply curve, unlike other financial assets, or even unlike other capital goods. So please have a read at chapter 1, which is already there on the under readings online. And also, as I mentioned during the lecture, I have shared for your easy access, I'll show you here, that if you go to the subject home canvas page and you go under the weekly content for week 1, I have uploaded a short table to help you understand which topic can be accessed from which sources. And these are the 2 important topics from assessment point of view from lecture 1. And as probably you might remember, that the first module, which will be covered between, I think, week, let me double check.
1 to 4?
I think so. I'm getting confused between 1 to 5 or 1 to 4.
The test is on the week 5, is it?
Yeah. So this is the, I just want to increase the size.
Assignment 2 question.
Week 1 to 5 is the first module, but in assessment 1, we only do between week 1 to 4. So between week 1 to 4, the assessment is basically a multiple choice quiz. But those will be confusing questions. Those will not be easy questions, as you can understand. Okay? So please familiarize yourself with the content, and we'll meet again next week. Any questions? I'm happy to wait, and otherwise, please feel free to leave. See you next week.
Thanks very much, Jyoti.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jyoti, what would you say is the liquidity of real estate? Like
it's difficult.
Lectures referred to real estate as like having it's not liquid, not liquid like product, but I think it's pretty liquid. Like.
So the lecture was comparing it with other financial assets like stocks, which is just piece of paper. You go online and you sell it in, say, maximum 1 hour. Now, let's say if you look at the comparative liquidity of real estate, how much time do you think on an average a property is advertised for?
2 months, 3 months.
2, 3 months?
Yeah.
Now, if you're a seller, let's say I buy a property today, and next day, another property is available at a slightly cheaper price. What do? I sell out my property and go and buy the next property? Do I do that?
No.
Why? If it's about t-shirts, you bought a new t-shirt today and the prices go half next day, what do? Probably I will go return mine.
I could buy that, yeah.
Yeah, but why don't we do this for houses?
The high transaction cost.
Yes, that makes it less liquid. Difficult to liquidate.
Yeah.
High transaction costs.
Yeah.
Including time cost.
Yeah.
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 So that's why we say that it's less liquid or illiquid. Yeah.
Like comparing to other financial products, it's less liquid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other question?
That's it for today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Right. Thank
Enjoy
you very
your
much.
evening. See you.
Thank you. Bye.